for those of you who are joining our webinars for the first time. At Starof, we seek to match people with work more efficiently. That's our broad vision statement. What it means is that we're trying to create like a vibrant community of developers. We're beginning with Java first, in this community, the expectation is for people to kind of network with other Java experts, find interesting career opportunities, and also interesting resources to kind of learn new stuff. Mainly with our webinars, the goal is to have developers learn about the exciting new stuff that's coming up in their areas, and hear from great speakers from the tech world about these new tools, languages, and frameworks, and so on, and then try and use them in work, and thereby become more productive, become better programmers, and also more marketable in the talent market. And for today's webinar, we have an excellent speaker, Edson Yanaga. He joins us from the US. Yanaga is Red Hat's Director of Developer Experience. He's a Java champion and a Microsoft MVP. He is also a published author and a frequent speaker at international conferences. He discusses Java, Kubernetes, Quarkus, microservices, cloud computing, and DevOps. And Yanaga's book, Migrating to Microservices Databases, is published by O'Reilly, one of those animal books. And it's very popular with developers. And then he has a widely followed Twitter handle. There's one of the fundamental beliefs for Yanaga is that everything we do, big or small, and it matters, and that we can all create a better world for people with better software. And his life's purpose is to deliver good software and to help developers worldwide in delivering better software faster and reliably. And today, his job, his hobby, and his life's purpose are essentially the same thing. And he's happy that he found his ikigai. So on to the topic for the evening. Today, if you see a majority of what happens on the back end, every backend developer spends a lot of time building and maintaining APIs. With Quarkus, which is a Kubernetes native Java stack, the process of developing APIs becomes simpler and fun, with cool features like hot reloads and other things. These APIs are also, which is the most important point, these APIs are also efficient in that they consume fewer CPU and memory resources. Yanaga will kind of walk us through this process of building APIs using Quarkus. The structure of the session is pretty typical. So we have about 50 to 60 minutes of the technical presentation, demo, code walkthroughs, things like that. And at the end, we have like 10 minutes set aside for Q&A. And we can, we can go beyond the allotted 1 hour to about 70 minutes, depending on how the session shapes up. And and also, if you have any questions, feel free to share them in the chat, and we will have Yanaga answer them for you at the end. Yanaga, I know it's a pleasure to have you on the webinar. Thanks for taking the time out. So let's begin.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be here with the Star of Java and sharing some joy, because today's session is about coding that sparks joy with Quarkus. And we're going to have a lot of fun today. Yes. Yeah, you already shared. I just want to point out that my Twitter handle is at the top of the screen at Yanaga. So if you want to learn more about Java, DevOps, microservice, and Quarkus, yes, you can follow me because I tweet a lot about that. And a fun fact is that I'm a Japanese Brazilian, not the typical Brazilian you would expect, but I was born and raised in Brazil. Yet all of my grandparents are Japanese. That's why you have this like different face in your screen. And I told about Twitter because I know that Java developers, they have a lot of time available to do social media, because Java developers, they're always waiting for something. They're always waiting for your project to complete, for a project to build, for your Maven build. They're waiting for your test to be executed, waiting for application to start, waiting for application to boot. Well, but that's the Java from the past. I truly believe that in the Java space, we're living a Java renaissance, where like we went through the dark ages when the sun was setting. We didn't have much innovation in the Java space. And we're truly thankful for a lot of different technologies. Like, for example, the latest releases of Java, like Spring Boot, the carryover Java for the dark ages. But I'm so happy to share with you that Java is living through the Renaissance. So we have some great innovations happening as of today, things like GraalVM and of course Quarkus. These are the things that are going to move Java forward for the next 25 years. So I truly believe that we're living a revolution, and what a time to be a Java developer. I think that a lot of developers from other languages, other platforms, now they can be jealous of what Java can provide to you as of 2022. Okay. Because with Java, at least the stuff that Java is consuming, like huge tons of memory and waits forever, we have to wait forever for everything. This is part of the past, because with Java, and in particular with Quarkus, it's all about developer joy, because you don't have to wait for anything anymore. It's just a matter of like coding and seeing your code run either in your machine or in production. So let's move from the slides, because I really want to show you the thing that sparked joy with Quarkus. So I'm going to move here now to my browser. So if you go to your new favorite website on the internet, which should be quarkus.io, you go to quarkus.io and you see this very beautiful website. And you can learn a lot about Quarkus. We have very interesting guides. We have a big community that you can reach out to if you have any doubt. But I want to start this presentation going to the top right corner of the screen and clicking on the Start Coding button. When you go there, you're redirected to the Quarkus generator, and Quarkus, as of today, is already on version 2.7.5 final, and we release a new version every 2 weeks because there is a lot of things happening in the Quarkus space. Now we have extension for most of your favorite libraries, and when I talk about extensions, what are Quarkus extensions? Quarkus extensions are dependencies that integrates a third-party libraries or integrates other core libraries from Quarkus to make your Java product run super fast and super small on top of the Quarkus platform. And to give you just like a feeling of this experience, I'll generate our very first Quarkus project. And the only boring part of this presentation is that I'll have to type the group ID, Red Hat Developers, the artifact ID, which is going to be Starof Java. And I'm just going to add one dependency for now, the REST EasyJax RS, because we want to create REST endpoints, and I'm going to generate our application. Let's download the zip file, move here. I'm going to move now to the terminal, and I'm going to unzip the file that I just downloaded. So Starof Java, let's move to the folder. And I'm going to open my IDE. My favorite Java IDE these days is VS Code with the Java extension provided by Red Hat as well. So now my IDE is open and my project is open. So you can see here that in the projects, I already have like a greeting resource available. But let's start the magic. I'm going to go back here to the terminal and type the magic words, which are mvn quarkus :dev. This way, Quarkus is starting in live coding mode, in development mode. When Quarkus starts in this mode, Quarkus starts to listen for changes in the file system. So whenever you change a Java file, a properties file, an HTML file, a YAML file, doesn't matter. Quarkus detects the changes and rebuilds the project and restarts. But you don't have to wait for seconds or minutes for that to happen. Everything happens in a matter of milliseconds when you're running in Quarkus live coding mode. So you can see here that my Quarkus project is already running. So, and I'm going to move here to my browser again. Let's see if the project is here. Yes, congratulations, my Quarkus application is running. And if I move here to hello, you can see that hello REST Easy is the message that is showing up here in my IDE. Let's try to change that. I'm going to change that. Hello star of Java. And I save the file, go back here to the browser, refresh, and it's automatically there. And how long did Quarkus take to restart? It took, for Quarkus, took only 260 milliseconds to restart. And the good thing is that the more you use Quarkus, the faster the restart time gets. So in a good day on my machine, when I'm not doing Zoom stuff, here for streaming. Usually my machine takes about 120, 180 milliseconds to restart. And I can tell that from my personal experience, this restart time is much faster than doing Node.js, for example, because the other Node.js projects that I have to work with, they usually take about 600 milliseconds to restart. So Quarkus can be up to 3 times faster than a Node.js project for development. Okay. What else can I show you? Well, we have this live coding feature. Also with Quarkus, we have what we call this amazing continuous testing feature. So if you're old enough, you remember that we tried to do some continuous testing in the past in the Java world, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago. We had plugins like JUnit Max and Infinite Test. They used to perform this continuous testing in our IDEs. But now Quarkus has continuous testing embedded in the Quarkus project. So you can see here in the bottom left corner of my screen, you can see this message that tests are paused. So if I type R here, you see that Quarkus can start running the test. And by default, Quarkus already created an integration test for me that has already failed. Let's see what is the reason that our test is failing. If I can scroll back here for the error, if I'm lucky enough, yes. My integration test is failing because, well, the test is expecting hello rest easy, which was the default message, but the actual message that is being returned by my REST endpoint is hello star of Java. Well, let's try to fix that. So you can see here that my tests are running, continuous test is running. So if I move back here to my IDE, I can open here the tests and I have the greeting resource test. Let's try to change. Quarkus already integrates with JUnit 5 and rest assured for the integration test. And oops, not this part. Instead of see hello star of Java. And I save the file. You can see that at the moment that I save the file, Quarkus triggered the re-execution of the test because it's continuous test, it's continuous testing. So it checked that my code has changed. He reran all the tests, and you can see that, well, all tests are green because my tests are passing, my integration test is passing. So you can have this very quick, very short feedback loop. You just save the file, you can see the results in your browser, but you can also get the feedback of all your unit tests and integration tests that are running inside of Quarkus. And it doesn't matter if it's a unit test or an integration test, you have a very fast feedback because Quarkus is super fast to start and to rerun all your tests. And we're not doing any kind of magic here. We can enable this continuous testing feature because Quarkus is so fast that a restart just takes a matter of milliseconds. So in just a matter of milliseconds, you can have your Quarkus project to be restarted and you can run your integration tests in just a matter of milliseconds. And you can see here that my integration test, it was executed in just a matter of 316 milliseconds. So in the blink of an eye, you can have the immediate feedback of all your tests being executed here in the background with Quarkus continuous testing. Okay. So, and you also might be arguing that Quarkus is only so fast because, well, this is just a REST endpoint. So let's try to add more enterprise capabilities to our Quarkus application. And no Quarkus application, no Java application actually, is enterprising enough if we don't add a database. So let's try to do that. So I'm going to try to add some extensions to my project. And some interesting ones, I want to add a database. So let's try to add a Postgresql database here. So I'm going to add a JDC driver for Postgresql. I also want to return some JSON for the interface. So let's try to add some REST easy JSON-B. I'd also like to use some novel ORM API. So I'm going to add like Hibernate, but not only Hibernate, but Hibernate with this novel API called Panache. And I also would like to show this and test this REST endpoints using my browser. So let's try to add the OpenAPI extension so Quarkus can self-document my REST APIs. And maybe we want to provide some validation of what I'm inputting in my REST endpoint. So I'm going to add some validation through the Hibernate validator project. And it should be enough. So I just hit enter here. And what is happening here that behind the scenes, my VS Code IDE is just calling the Maven plugin for Quarkus to add those dependencies, okay? And you can see here that I added these 5 new extensions, but what you didn't notice is that behind the scenes here, Quarkus running in live coding mode, already detected in my project, my pom.xml file changed, already downloaded those new dependencies, and is already restarting my Quarkus project. And not only that, because Quarkus already detected that I have Docker running locally on my machine and that I don't have a database running on my machine. But because I added the PostgreSQL JDBC driver, Quarkus assumed that, well, you asked for a JDBC driver for PostgreSQL and you don't have a database running locally. So Quarkus integrates with test containers, and Quarkus already detected that, downloaded the PostgreSQL database image, started a database, and auto-configured my project to be executed with this particular database. How cool is that? You can see that, yeah, my Quarkus project is already running. And if I scroll here, I have a lot of messages right now, but you could see here in the background that Docker was downloading the PostgreSQL image and it started this particular PostgreSQL image. Okay, so everything is auto-configured, auto-created. Everything is ready for me to start coding with a database, even though I didn't have a database installed on my machine. But let's test this particular project to see if I really have some persistence enabled in my project. Okay. So I'm going to move here to my IDE. And what is the easiest way for us to test a database? Let's try to create an entity. So I'm going to create a new file here, developer. Developer is going to be an @entity. And if you ever did some JPA in the past, you're probably, well, you need a private long ID. I need an @ID, @generated value. But this is the old Java. Again, you can do the legacy stuff that you're used to. But if you're using Quarkus, you can try the novel approach as well. You can try to do some panache. So what I'm going to show you is the novel way that panache allows you to do persistence. What I'm doing right now is that I'm creating an active record entity. So just by extending panache entity, I'm creating an entity that is active record style. In active record style, this is a persistence pattern that blends the entity with the persistence methods. So if you ever use a Play framework or view Ruby on Rails, you know what I'm talking about. But don't worry, if you're a traditional Java developer, you are used to using repositories. Panache allows you to use repositories and helps you to achieve your beautiful persistent repositories with Panache as well. But I want to show you the new way first, and later we can show you another way of creating repositories with Panache. Okay, and when you extend the Panache entity, you already have like the ID and other properties. So I only need to type the properties of my real entity. So every developer should have a name, so I'm going to private string name. But because I'm using Panache, I don't even have to type private fields and generate public getters and setters. Because think with me, if you're creating private fields and generating public getters and setters, you don't have true encapsulation because you're already exposing the internal state of your entity. So if you're using this kind of persistence, well, Panache allows you to use this pattern. You can create a public field, and don't worry, you can code like a public field, but it will run like a private property. Because at build time, Quarkus is going to translate that to a private field and generate public getters and setters for your entity. So at runtime, it doesn't make a difference. But at coding time and at build time, Quarkus is going to translate that to, as I said before, to private fields and public getters and setters. So it doesn't make any difference at runtime, but at build time and at code time, you can use this novel way. So it's much easier for you to code. Okay, so I just added this name. I'm going to create a developer resource .java, and it's going to be a REST endpoint. So I'm going to add a path to /developer, and I'm going to go public list developer, and I want to list all developers, because this is going to be a get endpoint. So to retrieve all developers from the database, I don't need to inject a repository. I don't need to inject an entity manager. I don't need to create a query. Everything I need to do is return developer. And because I'm using Panache, I can just say panache.list all. And because it's inherited from the Panache entity, I'm going to retrieve all developers from the database. Of course, in production, you would never do that. You would create a custom query. You would impose a limit or even pagination. But because this is just a demo, I'm going to retrieve everything. And how do I insert developers in my database? Well, for me to be able to do that, let's create a post endpoint. I create a post endpoint, and let's try to get public response, new developer, developer. And to be able to persist, I just need to make sure that developer ID is null and call developer.persist. And I can return response status. I can say that it was created. I can return the entity that I just persisted on developer and build the response. Okay. And the only thing that is missing here in my code is that I need to type the @transactional annotation because I need a transaction to be able to persist to the database. And that should be all. I think my code is ready to run. How do I test this REST endpoint? Well, let's move to the browser. So I'm going to open here my Chrome browser, and I'm going to type localhost 8080/developer. And what is happening here? Quarkus is already connected to my database. Quarkus created a database schema because I'm running in dev mode, executed the query, and retrieved all developers in my database, which is known because I don't have any developers persisted. Let's see the terminal to see what's happening. Okay, Quarkus already restarted the project and created the query, created the sequence here. Yes, you can see here the table developer does not exist, and it was created. So retrieve it. So how do I test the post endpoint? You might be wondering, yes, you need a plugin called Postman in your browser, or you need to type some boring curl CLI command, but we can use the OpenAPI extension. And because I'm using the OpenAPI extension in development mode, I can also use the Swagger UI that was enabled by Quarkus. Actually, Swagger UI. So we need the Swagger UI that is automatically enabled by Quarkus in development mode. You can see the endpoints that I have here. I have get developer, post developer, I have get hello. I'm interested in this one, the post developer. So you can see that I already have the schema. It's accepting the JSON. So let's try it out by clicking this button, try it out. And I can fill the template. I'm going to type here Yanaga and execute that. You can see that by the response, I already have a 201 created, and the response body that says Yanaga with ID number 1. So let's try to persist more developers. I'm going to add Anna Maria from my team. I'm going to execute that. I'm going to add, who else? Alex from my team as well. And I'm going to add Sebi from my team and execute. You can see that all of them are 201 created. So if I move back here to the get endpoint and refresh, you can see that all developers are already persisted. So ID1, all developers are already available from my database. And I could be picking some of you developers that are in the audience. So because we are all Java developers, and I hope everybody's super excited by the Quarkus features that I'm showing so far. What else can we do? We can try to add additional properties to our Java code. So if I move here to developer, what else? The Java developer should have also a favorite framework. And when I do that, I can also enable by default the Java developer's favorite framework should always be Quarkus. Okay. And when I do it, I change it. I added an additional property. So if I go back here to my browser and refresh, you can see that it's empty because since I'm running in development mode, every time my Quarkus project is restarted, my container is restarted as well, and my database is always empty. So, but let's try to persist that. So what I can do is I can move back here and let's try to persist the Yanaga again and execute. You can hear the 201 created, and if I refresh, Yes, I hear Yanagi is already in the database, and his favorite framework, as everybody's favorite framework these days, is Quarkus. Good. And what else? Well, you can see that I just saved the file, restart, and everything is automatically there. I can try to perform some validations in my code as well. I can say that here the name, for example, should be minimum length of the name should be 3. So if I try to add a developer whose name is like lesser than 3, well, I'll have a validation error. And to be able to show these persistent errors, these validation errors in the UI, I just need to go back here to my developer resource and type the @valid annotation so I can propagate the persistence validation messages from the persistence layer to the UI layer. And it should be all. So let's try to perform the same exercise, try to persist this developer, but instead of Yanaga, I'm going to try to persist the me developer, which should trigger a validation error. So I execute that. And what's happening here? Oops, I have a 400 error, which is bad request. And you can see here that in the JSON reply from Quarkus, Quarkus already shows me what is wrong. Well, the parameter must be greater than or equal to 3. What is the path is developer.name. The value that you provided is me, but it should be greater than or equal to 3. So let's try to perform it again, but this time with Yanaga. And execute that. So if I refresh, oops, did I have an error? Let's try to execute. Bad request must be greater than or equal to 3. What am I doing wrong? Is equal, then let's try refresh here. So oops, try it out. And Quarkus. Execute. Bad. What am I doing wrong? I have no idea. Yanaga, am I getting the wrong one? Oh, that's interesting. That's new, but it's probably my mistake. Okay, so let's move forward. What else can we do here with our developers? I'm just going to then, maybe I added the wrong annotation. Let's try to remove this particular one here. And what else can we do with our Quarkus application? Well, I've shown the active record style, but we're also wondering, can we do that with repositories? Yes, of course we can. And we can mix and match. You can use active record style. You can use repositories in your project. And when do you recommend one or the other? I think that if you're using a very basic CRUD REST endpoint, active record is probably easier and faster. But if you have a complex domain model, if you're using domain-driven design, very likely you have complex queries, very likely you'd like to use repositories. So it's a matter of choice. It's up to you to choose which one would you like. But I'm going to show you how you can create a developer resource. Okay. Oh, actually a developer repository. If I can type it correctly, repository.java. You can do that, and you can say that public class developer repository is going to be application scoped. And this one is going to implement Panache repository of developer. Okay, and already have all the basic repository methods. But if I want to create a custom finder, I can do that as well. So let list. I can find all developers, find by name, I can say string name. And by doing that, if I import the correct one, list, I can return, find, and the query I can say just, well, the query can be just name equals to name. And I list, okay? So I don't have to type select developer, select or from developer, where developer.name equals to something, because Quarkus already assumes a lot of things. So it makes it much easier for you to be coding with Quarkus, okay? So I can say the name equals to this name, and I can use this particular method. Let's move here to developer resource. So what can I do here? I can say the query parameter. names, because if name equals to null, I can just return all developers. But or else, if developer name is not null, I can return. And this is the time when I have to inject the developer repository and return developer repository, find by name and the name that I just provided. Okay, cool. So before anybody asks me, yes, we do support constructor injection, but I'm just lazy. That's why I'm using it at inject notation. So our query, our repository should be already working. Let's move back here to the browser and let's try to persist our developer again. So now, yeah, my Java developer was persisted. And if I try to query, Yanaga is already here. Let's try to see if I can say here name equals to Alex. And when I type this, I have an empty JSON array. But if I type name equals to Yanaga, you can see that the query is working. So I have repositories and active record style blended in the same resource. And actually, I can provide both for the same entity. What else can I show you? You also might be wondering, I'm pretty sure that if I asked you here in the audience for you to raise your hands and to ask you, but how many of you are Spring developers? I can be certain that at least like 70%, 80%, or even 90% of you would be raising your hands telling you you are Spring developers, including me. I would raise my hand and say, well, I'm a Spring developer because I've been using Spring since version 1.0 beta 2. So I've been using Spring since the beginning. I'm a lifelong Spring developer. I dedicated the greatest part of my career for using Spring and developing Spring applications. But after you've seen Quarkus, it's hard to not want to use Quarkus in your projects. It's hard for you to not get excited about Quarkus can provide to you. So you can always wonder, well, is there a way for me to reuse my existing Spring skills, but yet still be super productive, super fast, supersonic, subatomic with Quarkus? And the answer is yes, you can. So what I'm going to show you right now is how can you use the Spring APIs on top of the Quarkus. So you can use your existing knowledge of the Spring APIs, but still have this amazing development experience and immense productivity of using Quarkus for your daily projects, okay? So how can I do that? I just have to go back here to my IDE and ask my IDE to add another Quarkus extension to my project. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to add to my project the Spring Web API, so I can create Spring controllers, and also the Spring repository, the Spring Data API, because I really Spring Data is probably one of my favorite Spring APIs. So I'm going to add this both. And we also support, of course, Spring Core, Spring Security, and other Spring APIs. And if you don't have your favorite Spring API listed, well, just join us in the Quarkus project. We're always willing to accept contributions. And if enough people ask, then, well, maybe the Quarkus engineers will implement the Spring API on top of Quarkus. For now, just these two APIs, I'm going to ask here. You can see that Quarkus already detected that. And behind the scenes, you can see that Quarkus is already downloading it. And let's see. Oh, I had a compilation error. Okay, let's see. Let's see if it's still running. Yes, running. I think it was a node message. So Quarkus added the extension, downloaded, restarted my project. And do I have changes here? And let's create a developer repository. So I'm going to create a new interface, Spring Developer Repository .java. Okay, so this time it needs to be an interface. I need to annotate to add repository. And it's going to extend JPA repository from the Spring and developer. Okay, and I can also create the same finder method because I can list developer find by name. I can provide string name. And this is a Spring implementation list. Let's import the white one. Yes, so you can see here that I am importing the Spring interfaces or Spring annotations to my project, and let's create a Spring controller. So I'm going to create a developer controller here. It's going to be a class, going to be a REST controller. REST controller. We need to request mapping. It's going to be path. It's going to be /spring-developer. And I can also create a get mapping here. Public list. Developers. And I can get here, I think, query parameter, no, path parameter. Let's see. Query, not query. Oh gosh, I forgot the name of the Spring annotation for that. So I have request mapping. Let's see if we can go through the APIs. Request mapping. Parameter. And if you can see here, somebody here in the chat, if you can help me, I'm accepting that. But of course, I have another browser here. I have a Spring controller. You can always Google that controller. You can see that I'm much more user to Quarkus. So it's a request parameter. Yes. Request parameter is going to be a name. I can use string name. And I can inject. I can use like auto-wired, or you can use constructor injection as well. Let's try to add the Spring developer repository. And I can return developer repository dot find by name. And I can provide the name. Or else I can just say, well, if name equals to null, I can return all developers from the database just to replicate the other repository, the other controller that I have, find all. Okay, so this should be the exactly same behavior that I had with my JAX-RS resource, but now using the Spring API. So let's test this one. I'm going to go back here to my browser. I need to persist one. Let's execute again. So I have at least one developer persisted. I can see that I have a problem here with my project. So sometime it happens. Let's stop the amazing development mode and try to start it over again. And the nice thing is that whenever you're running your Quarkus project in the development mode for a long time, if it has some kind of error, well, you can always do a fresh restart and it's going to be super fast. Doesn't matter what. So right now, I'm having Quarkus REST Easy Jackson. Okay, so I have a conflict. Well, this is new for me. Let's try to add this particular annotation or this particular dependency. So it seems that I have a conflict. So instead of REST Easy JSON B, I need Quarkus REST Easy Jackson dependency, but it's okay. I just have to change this here. You can see my Quarkus project is already downloading the dependencies and restarted. And that's what happens when you don't use Quarkus for some time, like you don't use this particular Quarkus extension for some time. You just have some surprises because Quarkus evolves so fast. And I didn't do some Spring coding for some time. So let's try to restart my projects. It seems to take some time. Oops, I stopped it here. Sorry, I typed the wrong letter, the wrong shortcut. While Quarkus was still spinning up my database container. So let's do it over. Okay, just have a couple of seconds. Yeah, you can see, now you can see the messages. The Quarkus is starting my database instance connected, configured, and everything running. So now it should be good. Yes, empty. Let's try to persist again. Yes. Documented. So developer, yes, is working. So let me try to reach out to the Spring-developer endpoint. You can see that yes is returning Yanaga. Let's see if my query Alex returns empty. And also if I don't provide any of the parameters, it's returning everybody. Okay. So what I did right now, I reused my existing Spring skills. I coded using the Spring APIs, but I'm running on top of Quarkus. And a very common question is, oh, does it mean that you're running Spring on top of Quarkus? No, because by running Spring on top of Quarkus, we wouldn't benefit what Quarkus can do for your project. So if we were running Spring on top of Quarkus, the Quarkus part would be super small and super fast, but the Spring part would be like as big and as low as traditional Spring. So what we did actually, because the Spring project guys, they did a great job. So what we did, they created everything using interfaces and annotations. What the Quarkus guys did, they re-implemented the Spring APIs on top of Quarkus. That's why you can still use your Spring APIs on top of Quarkus and be super fast and super small. Okay. What else can we do? Well, Quarkus also integrates with GraalVM. So everything that I've shown you so far is Quarkus. It's running on top of OpenJDK. It's traditional Java, in the sense that it's still running on top of OpenJDK, but it's traditional Java that is super fast, super small, and super amazing development experience. Okay, but for some use cases, you can also integrate Quarkus with GraalVM. So it's a bonus thing. You can also create native images using GraalVM, and it's super easy for you to be able to do that with Quarkus. If you ever tried to use GraalVM in the past, you know it can be super slow and super complicated for you to set up GraalVM. But if you're using Quarkus, it's just a matter of going here. And I'm going to create another project for you to be able to see, to witness that. So I'm going to use the Maven plugin, which is another way for you to create a Quarkus project. Quarkus Maven plugin. I'm going to use the latest version, 2.7.5 final, and create. Let's create here. Conrad had developers. Let's say remote version. Yes. And for me to be able to create a native image using GraalVM, because I already have GraalVM installed here on my machine, I just have to type mvn package and enable a native profile. That's all. Don't have to configure anything else. Quarkus is going to figure out the best way to create an optimized native image. So I'm going to run it, and we should be good. This process takes about like 1.5 minutes on my machine when I'm not using Zoom, like I'm just doing development. So while we don't wait for it to finish, I'd like to show you some more information. Because I've said that Quarkus sparked joy, and Quarkus was also created for this new container first, cloud native first, Kubernetes first world. Because as a Java developer, I was like truly concerned about the future of Java, because Java was consuming a lot of memory. Quarkus was lowest to start, which was perfect for the world in which Java was created. Well, in the late 90s, in the early 2000s, what we would get one machine, we would install an application server, and that application server would be running for weeks, months before it was restarted, because Java would be able to consume the entire memory of the server and be running for that. So Java was optimized for long-running applications. So once the JIT triggered and Java performed all the optimizations, Java was and still is the fastest runtime on earth. But you need to wait for it to warm up. But in the cloud-native world, well, you don't have just one big instance running all the time. You will have multiple. And you want to spin up new instances when you have like a lot of requests. You want to scale them down when you don't have like many requests to save costs. So it's a matter of like, you don't have one big instance, you have multiple small instances, and you want to scale up and down all the time. Well, Java wasn't a good fit for that. And a lot of Java developers, they use it, they moved to another languages and platforms in the past 10 years, 5 years. I know a lot of people that have moved to JavaScript, Node.js, or using Go for their runtime projects, because, well, Java wasn't a good fit. And me too, I thought that I would have to learn another language because Java wouldn't survive for the next 25 years. But thanks to Quarkus and other nice projects that works well with Quarkus, like GraalVM, we know that Java is going here to stay, and actually Java can be the best option for this new cloud native and Kubernetes first world. So let me show you some numbers how fast and how small Java can be if you're using Quarkus, and if you're using Quarkus with GraalVM too. So regarding memory consumption, If you use Quarkus with GraalVM, you can see that your REST project is going to consume only 13 megabytes of RAM. If you use Quarkus with OpenJDK, your Quarkus project is going to consume only 74 megabytes of RAM. And your traditional cloud native stack, your traditional Java application that you've been developing the past 5-10 years is going to take at least 140 megabytes of RAM. So depending on the scenario that you choose to, your Quarkus application can be 2 times smaller than legacy Java or 10 times smaller than legacy Java when running in production. Okay, so when would you use Quarkus plus GraalVM? Well, we can use that in some serverless scenarios. But most of the Red Hat customers that are using Quarkus in production, they are using, if not all, actually, I don't know anybody that's using Quarkus with GraalVM in production. Everybody is using Quarkus with OpenJDK. And we have some very good examples, like, for example, Lufthansa. They decided to migrate their Spring Boot microservices they were running on AWS to Quarkus. And just by migrating the microservice from Spring Boot to Quarkus, they were able to save in their monthly AWS bill, they were able to save 50% of their billing costs. Okay, so just by switching from Spring Boot to Java, they were able to use like smaller VMs. So they saved like half of their billing costs, which I think is a very impressive savings. Let's try to add a database to these numbers. So if you're using REST plus JPA with Quarkus and GraalVM, your application is going to consume 35 megabytes of RAM. Quarkus plus OpenJDK is going to consume 130 megabytes of RAM. And your traditional cloud native stack is going to consume at least 280 megabytes of RAM. So it doesn't matter which option you choose. With Quarkus, you can be much smaller or even smaller if you choose to use GraalVM, okay? With Quarkus, you only have these 2 options. Let's talk about startup time. And actually, not only startup time, but also time to reply to the first request. Because other frameworks, they just kind of cheat. They declare everything as lazy. And just to show you a small startup time, but when the first request comes, you have to pay the price. So with Quarkus, we measure the time to boot and time for the first response, because that's what really matters in this cloud native world. So with Quarkus plus GraalVM, first reply is in 14 milliseconds. With Quarkus plus OpenJDK, first reply in 750 milliseconds. And your traditional cloud native stack is going to take at least 4.3 seconds. Okay, so depending on your scenario, Quarkus can be at 100 times faster for it to boot and to start. Quarkus plus JPA, well, it's going to take 55 milliseconds. Quarkus plus OpenJDK, 2.5 seconds. And actually, these numbers are better because I'm taking like numbers from an older version. And your traditional cloud native stack is going to take so long that I had to scroll the image because it's going to take at least 9.5 seconds. So Quarkus can be super fast and super small when you're running your Java projects, okay? And now that I've talked this, my Quarkus binary image is already ready. So let's move here. You're able to see that I have this particular runner that is consuming 40 megabytes of RAM. This is a complete binary image that can be executed, self-contained image. So, but just by running this, I have my Quarkus application already. So what else can we do? I can, oops. Let's try to execute this. So I can run my remote runner and I can type some VM parameters. So I'm going to run with a 6 megabyte heap size. Do you ever wonder the day where your Java application will be able to be executed with a 6 megabyte heap size? Well, me neither, but today it's true thanks to Quarkus and thanks to GraalVM. So let's run it. Let's fire allow. So it started in a matter of 43 milliseconds on my machine because I'm using Zoom. And if I go back here to the browser, localhost 8080, yes, my Quarkus application is up and running. Let's see how much memory it's consuming. I have an alias here that allows me to check. It's consuming only 20 megabytes of total resident set size. So I have a 6 megabyte heap, and I have an additional 14 megabytes of like stack, out of memory heap, and threads and all this other stuff from the JVM. So total resident set size of my Quarkus project using Graal, 20 megabytes of RAM. Cool, isn't it? Well, not only that, Quarkus integrates super well with other technologies. For example, Kubernetes, and other stuff. And before I dig into the other capabilities of Quarkus, let me try to explain to you why Quarkus is so fast. Quarkus is so fast because in the past 25 years, almost all of the Java applications, almost all of the Java frameworks, when they're starting up, they try to do things in lazy mode because Java was low to start. They declared everything as lazy. So only initialize, only start up when you need it. Well, with Quarkus is the opposite. Quarkus is eager. Quarkus does everything ahead of time. Quarkus performs all optimizations ahead of time at build time. So when Quarkus starts, Quarkus just needs to start your application because everything is already ready into memory. So how does it work? Your traditional Java application, when it's starting up, it needs to scan for annotations or metadata, needs to go through your project. After it found those resources, you need to parse the descriptors, it needs to parse annotations, parse the properties files, parse the XML, YAML files, everything. And after it gather all the information, it needs to generate the meta model. Okay, create this bean, add this proxy, inject this particular property, inject this other bean. So all of these steps, they take time. And once all of this is ready, your traditional Java application is going to start the services. Okay, well, with Quarkus, Quarkus does all of this, but Quarkus does all of these three steps at build time. Build time. So when your Quarkus application starts, everything is already ready. Quarkus just needs to start, like to bind to the 8080 port, to connect to the database, and everything is ready. So Quarkus performs all the things, all the steps that other traditional Java applications does, but Quarkus does all of this at build time. So that's why you can have this super fast startup time with Quarkus. And because Quarkus doesn't have to load the classes that perform these three steps, they're going to be stuck into memory for almost the entire life cycle of your application. Quarkus is much smaller because Quarkus doesn't need to load any of those classes. So that's why Quarkus is always super small at runtime, because when you're loading your Quarkus application into memory, you're really only loading the classes that are required at runtime. So that's the magic behind Quarkus. The magic behind Quarkus is in the Quarkus Maven plugin, the Quarkus compiler, and in the Quarkus extensions ecosystems that allow Quarkus to optimize all of these, all of Quarkus dependencies at build time. Okay. So Quarkus has a best of breeds. Since the very first release of Quarkus, we support your favorite frameworks, your favorite libraries. We have beautiful Kubernetes extensions. We have all of this and much more, because the Quarkus ecosystem as of today is so big. Quarkus is like 3 years old. Have a lot of people from the community contributing their favorite extensions. So Quarkus ecosystem as of today is super large. Your favorite frameworks, favorite libraries are already supported in the Quarkus ecosystem. And Quarkus makes it so easy for you to be able to deploy your applications anywhere, including Kubernetes. If you want to deploy your Quarkus application to Kubernetes, well, it's just a matter of declaring here the Kubernetes extension. You click, you add to your project, and build success. So let's move here. If I go back and enter the Starof Java project and type mvn package, what is going to happen is Quarkus is going to get all the information from my project and is going to generate the Kubernetes YAML files for me. So I don't have to type YAML anymore, because Quarkus can extract all the required metadata from my application and generate the YAML file automatic for me. Okay, Quarkus is running integration test right now. So if we just wait for a couple of seconds more, and the integration tests are taking longer right now because Quarkus requires a database to run the integration tests. So it took a bit longer because of the integration tests, but you can see that now in the target folder, I have this Kubernetes folder as well. So if I try to take a look at the target Kubernetes YAML file, you can see that I already have the YAML file with everything ready for me to be able to configure my Quarkus application inside Kubernetes. And if I'd like to tweak this YAML file, I don't have to type YAML. I just need to go and configure some Quarkus properties, and everything will automatically be reflected here. And everything is very tightly integrated. If you add health checks, well, Quarkus is going to configure the Kubernetes health checks as well. And if you add a database, well, Quarkus is going to configure the database health checks for you in the Kubernetes health checks as well. So everything works very well and very smooth with Quarkus. I think we're right in the top of the hour. So I'd like to thank you very much for staying with me for this 55 minutes so far. And I hope you enjoyed Quarkus. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. And if I have to give you a call to action, I'd like to ask you, go to quarkus.io and start your very first Quarkus project. You'll be amazed with what Quarkus can do for you, okay? So thank you. And I don't know if you have any questions, but if we do, I'm available to answer that.
Hey, thanks a lot, Yanaga. It's an extraordinary session. So we really loved the code walkthroughs and also the comparisons with, really surprising comparisons with both Spring and the cloud native, and then how Quarkus comes out in comparison. So so really interesting, because the idea is that when you use a framework, it adds like a second or two to the actual execution time. Not a second, but at least like somewhere around like 200, 300 milliseconds. But to actually reduce that by so much is like really amazing. So I've got like, two questions that got forwarded to me. So one is, are there use cases that you know of if Quarkus is already being used in production at big companies? Because, for somebody to kind of go and convince their boss that we'll use something like this, you'd need some heft behind that. So any case studies that you've heard of?
Yes. There are a lot of people using Quarkus in production already. If you go to the Quarkus website, in the Quarkus blog, we have a lot of testimonials of people using Quarkus. But two big companies that I can say, because it's public already, like Vodafone is using Quarkus in production, Lufthansa is using production, Talkdesk, which is a startup, a big startup actually, is already using it in production. And we have other like big banks, financial companies using that, but I'm not authorized to say. But if you go to the Quarkus blog, you can see all the companies that authorizes us to mention their name are already on the Quarkus website.
Great. And a lot of people kind of, that we work with, this is like an intro to the second question, is that a lot of people who already know Java and Spring Boot, and then who are like dabbling in microservices, want to learn like new frameworks. And, one of the things they find it hard to break into is the Kubernetes, so it's not very easy for everybody to kind of understand that and then, become like a, expert at Kubernetes. So just to kind of, for Quarkus, similarly, is there a pathway that you would recommend? If somebody knows just Java and Spring Boot, what would you recommend as the learning pathway? What should they learn to kind of become proficient at? Yeah.
Yeah, what I would recommend is that if you're already familiar with Spring, you can, if you add the Spring the Spring extensions to your Quarkus project, just like I did, you'll be already familiar. You'll be able to create your some stuff. And as you're like using more Quarkus on a daily basis, you'll be able to see that the documentation is really good, and the support from the Quarkus community in the Zulip chat is also great. They reply like in a timely manner. So you'll be able to be learning to that. And if you want to take the next step and deploy your Quarkus application into Kubernetes, you also see that, yes, I'll admit that Kubernetes is painful. Like, it's very hard for you to learn, and it's very hard for you to be productive with Kubernetes because it has a very steep learning curve. But after you reach that level, after you've been through everything that you have to learn through Kubernetes is very productive. So the problem with Kubernetes is it takes a lot of time for you to ramp up with it. Quarkus make it a lot easier because Quarkus does everything out of box. To create a container, just add an extension and Quarkus will create a container for you. deploy to Kubernetes. Just add an extension, and Kubernetes will do that for you, and will configure everything out of box for you. So you don't have to worry about because Quarkus provides tries to optimize everything, and so you're ready to run. And when you're a Kubernetes expert, you'll be able to tweak with Quarkus as well. But from day zero, just by adding an extension, you're able to deploy your applications to Kubernetes. So if you know Spring and you know Java, start your Quarkus project, add the Spring extensions, add the Kubernetes extension, and deploy your very first Quarkus Java Spring application in Kubernetes in a matter of 30 minutes. That's something that is possible with Quarkus very easily. Okay, so that would be one of my recommendations.
Great. That's amazing. So thanks a lot, Yannick, once again for a great session. We really enjoyed the code walkthroughs and the the slides and especially on the utilization, the CPU, the memory, how much more efficient Quarkus is. That probably is something that swings the decision in favor of something like this. So thanks a lot for taking the time out and doing this session. Really loved the energy and the examples and everything. So would really love to bring you back. Everything goes well. Very soon for another session. Yeah, I mean, can't thank you enough for doing this with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was great to be here, and I hope you enjoyed. And take care. Stay safe.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.